Good afternoon. Welcome to session 3, Phones, Folly, and Fruit, training our kids to tame technology usage. This breakout session is sponsored by the Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are grateful for their generous support to help make this session possible, and you can learn more about Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary by visiting their booth in the exhibit hall or online at sebts.edu. I have the pleasure of introducing these lovely ladies today. I guess I should introduce myself also. I'll be your moderator. My name is Lindsey Carlson, and I am a pastor's wife. I've been married almost 19 years. We have 5 children. Our oldest is a girl. She's 17, and then we have 4 boys that go all the way down to 6. And I am a writer for Crossway. I have 2 books with Crossway Publishing, and my newest one is called A Better Encouragement, Trading Self-Help for True Hope, and it just released, so you should find it in the bookstore. And next to me, we have the lovely Meade Harris, and she is a single mom of 3 sons, ages 20, 23, and 25. She is the editor-in-chief of the Rooted Ministry blog and the co-host of the Rooted Parent podcast. Next, we have Chris Gordon. She's a wife, mom of 3. Her children are ages 16 through 11, and she is the co-founder of At His Feet Studies, where she and a therapist have co-authored 9 Bible studies for busy women. Thank you very much. She earned her master's degree from and is also visiting instructor at Covenant Theological Seminary. And last but certainly not least, on behalf of Southeastern, Missie Branch, who serves as the Assistant Dean of Students to Women and a Director of Graduate Life at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. She is also currently a student there, completing her graduate degree in ethics, theology, and culture. And Missie has a podcast called Women and Work that is fantastic that you should check out. Missie and her husband have 4 children, ages 24 through 17. Welcome them. Okay, so now let's dig in. So you've come to a session called Phones, Folly, and Fruit because we all want our children to be fruitful in their lives, and we don't want to see bad fruit come out of technology that exists right now. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for caring about your children. And this discussion, I want to make really clear in the beginning, is not a discussion because TGC found the 4 people that have figured this out. We're real clear on the fact that we are all learners who are staying tethered to the grace of Jesus one day at a time. However, after sitting several hours with these women and hearing their thoughts, they are filled with the grace of Jesus, and I'm super excited to tell you a little bit more about how they have navigated these choppy waters. So first, I want to tell you kind of how we're going to approach this session, because this is not going to be a session where I'm going to give you a list of products that are going to be like, make sure you have this, make sure you have this, make sure you have this. We all have Google, and we can all look up on our phones devices and things that are helpful. As Christians, we want to learn how to navigate these waters with wisdom and grace and guided by the Word of God. So we're going to think about it in 4 categories, and one is going to be cautions, one is going to be aim, one is going to be tools, and one is going to be hope. Those are 4 things that I want you to set as a compass as you're thinking through issues in your own homes, in your own families, with your own children. So today I want to go ahead and start with the cautions, because I don't think that our only cautions when we're talking about technology are just pornography or predators. I think that there's a whole lot more that we need to be thinking about as we think of cautions to have in mind in regards to technology. So Anna, I would love to hear, what's a caution that you would give to parents as we think about how to steward technology and teach our children to walk through that?
So I know that most of you have walked by a group of teenagers in a public space. They might be at an ice cream parlor or on the sidelines of a baseball game or something. And they're all sitting together, gathered with their friends, and their heads are down and they're on their phones. And I think one of the things that concerns me, that I've seen my children struggle with, but I also feel like we as adults struggle with, is the way in which technology can actually hamper relational development. And I think for teenagers in particular who are at a phase of life where they're really learning to develop friendships and relationships on their own, out from under mom and dad, they don't necessarily get some of the interpersonal skills that are just so very crucial to being with other people. So I think that we need to be really careful that our kids are spending a lot of time with people. I know that sounds really obvious, but they can spend hours locked away in rooms alone, mediating relationships through screens. And we can do a lot simply by insisting that they be with our family and by practicing hospitality and insisting they spend time with people.
So you're not saying to just take all technology away, right? Clearly
oh gosh,
not.
no. I
but
mean,
it's a good thing to think that we can actually hold both of those things, right?
Absolutely, and I hope we'll talk about I know we're going to talk about some of the good ways in which technology can enhance relationship and preserve and develop relationship, especially since we're such a mobile culture. And but I think we just need to be really careful that our teenagers are developing interpersonally, actually knowing how to be with people.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you. All right, Chris, what do you think? What's a caution that we should take into mind?
Yeah, I think when I had younger children and heard things like this, I'm kind of black or white, and so I'd immediately think, you know what, they're never going to have a phone because they're evil. And we have to start with a theology of technology and say to ourselves, okay, technology is a tool, just like money. Jesus didn't say money is the root of all evil. He said the love of money is the root of all evil. So it's just a tool. It is neutral, but our hearts, which are wicked, will tempt us one way or another. So what we actually have to deal with is our hearts, and that's what's hard. It's so much easier. I want to just be like, y'all, there's going to be no cell phones at all in this house, or we're all going to have them all the time. And I think we need to shift our paradigm a little bit and think it's our hearts that we need to deal with, which means it's going to be much more complicated and much more individualized.
Absolutely. Like, we don't take away their friends because they're having problems, right? We teach them how to navigate those relationships, you know? Missie, what would you say?
I think one of the things we probably need to be careful of is because we are Christians and we have a Christian home and culture, we assume our children are Christians and we treat them like they are. And so then we hold them to Christian standards like the Spirit is working in their lives. I would say all the time, pray for her, she's not a Christian. About my 5-year-old. This girl is not a believer, that's why she's acting like that. Don't ask her to pray, she's not a Christian, you know what I'm saying? So. But I think that we have to be honest with ourselves and say, while we're training them, when we talk to them like they're Christians, then we're going to expect Christian responses and Christian action from them, and they're not always. And so, or else they're baby Christians, they need to be matured. And so I think treating them like they're believers when they're not can also set them up for failure.
And I want to ask a follow-up question because, Chris, you had something that I thought was really helpful as far as, like, it's not just not making assumptions about their maturity in Christ. Mm-hmm. There are other assumptions that we must be cautious about as well. Chris, can you speak to that a little bit about things that you've had to consider about that?
Sure. So I have 3 children. 2 are on the autism spectrum. And it goes boy, girl, boy. So if you can imagine my daughter in the middle, she's the neurotypical going, what in the world? But anyway, so I think our children are on different paths developmentally. So you may have a neurotypical, you may have non-neurotypicals. You may have a child who is very self-aware, and my child may be at a place where she can't self-regulate, and maybe yours can. And all of those things are okay because our children don't develop like this. I wish it would be easier if they did. They're kind of like this. And so in the end, we have to think of it. You're the expert on your kid, and you can pull principles from other people, but they're going to be just in a little bit different spot, and that matters too.
Yeah, and I think that's, like, I'm sure that there are some moms here because, like, I'm thinking about this when I was a new mom. Like, so much of this you're navigating for the first time. And so you might be thinking, okay, but I don't know my kid yet. They're 4, you know, or like they're 6. You know, there's some of us that are like, we're still, you know, I have a 17-year-old and I have a 6-year-old. So it's really, like, I'm regularly reminded that, like, I might know my 17-year-old really well. I don't know my 6-year-old really well. Different things are coming out at different times. But I think that like when we have an understanding, like the caution is that we need to know them, that we have to like kind of give ourselves a little bit of slack in the beginning to say, and that takes time. Like it takes time to understand your kids and know your kids and what their specific abilities or disabilities are, or what is going to set them off, or like just being okay with that learning curve, like as you're trying to figure that out, like what is going to be good for our family.
I always tell my oldest, you're my practice kid. I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Don't know what I'm doing.
But then you have to tell your last kid, you're pretty much perfect.
Sorry to you too.
That's problematic. Okay, so as we think about, we've talked about some cautionary things, like let's try not to do this. Let's talk about things that we can aim at, that are things to consider, that we can say, this is really like a goal of what I'm striving for. What would be something that you might suggest?
So I think it is helpful to think about the phone as a discipleship tool, and really all technology. And what I mean by that is they are simply instruments by which we can discern what's going on in our child's heart. Paul Tripp has a book called Age of Opportunity, and it's about teenagers. And I love the way that he frames everything that goes on with teenagers as opportunities to train children, to love Jesus, to point them to Jesus, to disciple them, and to discern what's going on in their hearts. And through our interaction and observing our children's interactions with their devices, we start to get a picture of what's going on in their hearts. Anything that God reveals to you about your child through their technology is information that you can use to parent that particular child because you're getting to know them. And to me, that takes a little bit of the fear out of it. I don't have to be afraid, because if God has shown me something, then God is going to help me deal with it. He's going to lead me as I lead my child. I'll use an example. One time I was talking to one of my kids about the phone, and I just had this rant. I just went off for no apparent reason about pornography for 10 minutes. And with 3 boys, that was where my fear was, and that's what I was most worried about. But I ended up, that was not his struggle. I really bummed him out because I was not seeing him. I was processing my own fear. And then what sort of came out later was that he was having more trouble with group chat and kind of saying snarky things on group chat and alienating friends. So he was having more trouble with just communication. And he was 15. You know, kids that age are learning how to talk in groups. And over the phone, over a group chat, that's even harder. So what I'm saying was I let my issues, my idols, my fears get in the way of discipling what was going on with him. So we can use the phone to learn more about our child.
That's great. That's very helpful. What would you say, Chris?
Yeah, I would say as you learn, and also in what I learned about my kid, at least for my oldest, it was that all he wants is the phone, all he wants is the screen. And so also thinking the same thing, I remember breastfeeding this child and praying at 2 a.m, dear God, please don't let him be addicted to pornography. I mean, the kid hadn't even learned to talk, and I was already afraid, you know. Yeah. And instead what it became more was, and what we've struggled with more, is that that's what he wants instead of people. And so learning to incentivize the people and saying, you know what, I mean, I'm talking about incentivize. I mean, like, hey, I will pay for you to go spend time with the people. And to teach him, hey, this feedback loop with people actually feels good. That's not what he would choose, but to redirect and aim him that way.
Absolutely. That's great. Missie?
That's great. I would say... I'm probably a crazy type of parent, I'm going to be honest, but my daughter is probably in the room, so I'm sorry, babe. But I would say that I do think that it's a little crazy that we think our kids have to have certain things. Like, I don't think you have to have a $1,000 phone, me personally. Like, I bought you pencils. Where are they? You know, I remember my daughter doing an entire PowerPoint presentation about why we should give them phones. And literally, I'm like, can you do your chore, right? Come on, like, and I think that technology and these things that they want need to be things they earn, things they work towards, things that they have buy-in on. So I'm not buying a $1,000 phone and you drop it tomorrow and it's, oops, we got insurance, and then I got to pay $400 for it to get fixed, and oops, I need a new case. Okay, I have 4 kids. That's doing the math. It's not going to work. So my children, all of them got phones when they were able to help pay for the phones. Whatever grade that was, whatever your friends have, I really don't care. Talk to their moms then. And so, but that's just the type of parent I am. And so we really had quality conversations of, you're going to have buy-in on a $1,000 phone. And you're also going to provide insurance. And this monthly bill that I don't have to pay costs something. So how are we going to navigate how that works? And even though you're paying for it, I'm still in charge. So when I say hand it to me, there's not even going to be a discussion over, Mom, that's not a conversation, because the contract is being signed now. Hand me your phone. And of course, I'm also teaching them at the same time that I don't need to go through your phone every day, and I don't constantly need to be checking, but you understand that in order for you to get this phone, we both have buy-in in this thing. And there's a responsibility that comes along with that. And I promise you, every one of my children, every time they got their phone within a week, drop it and broke it. Good thing you bought insurance, sweetheart.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and what you're really talking about is the principle of stewardship.
Right.
Like, you're teaching responsibility because stewardship matters. You're teaching discipleship because discipleship matters. You're teaching emotional intuitiveness and connection with real people. All of these are biblical principles. They're not just what's good parenting 101 from the parenting books. This is these were all God's ideas and God's principles that technology just opens the door to be able to facilitate, I also think it's important. My daughter, she's 17 now, but when she was entering the phone years, I remember thinking that I had this very rigid, well, we're going to do the right thing. We're not going to give our daughter this, or do this, and this is how we're going to do it. And I was not open to reason, I think, in some ways, because I was a new parent at that stage. And so I remember her coming home very specifically in the school context that she was in. The school let them have phones during lunch break. So she's like, Mom, I'm coming home every day and telling you, she's coming home and telling me, I'm sitting at the lunch table every day and everyone else is on their phone. And I'm by myself and I want to connect with people and I'm genuinely trying, but I can't because everyone's in a phone. And I had taken that away from her and said, I value relationship and discipleship and responsibility, so you can't have that. When I was talking to a child who was responsible, who did know how to relationally connect, and had earned the right to speak up and say, hey, Mom, can you see me and know me? And help me. And I think it was so important for me to be open to reason, to say, you're right. I'm sorry that I made assumptions, about what I thought was best, because that's what all my friends would think was acceptable and pleasing to the Lord, when really I wasn't actually considering you or your circumstances. So I think that part of that aim is to know ourselves well enough to kind of be humble before the Lord about our own children, and courageous enough to do what we think the Lord is calling us to do in parenting our children, and not what all of our friend circle is doing. We're not called to mimic what everyone in our discipleship group is doing. We're called to walk by the Spirit and be led by biblical teaching and to make wise choices, right? So now that we have kind of gotten that framework out, I think that it's helpful to talk about some tools, because when it's all just theory, we don't want people to leave here and to say okay, well, great, now I have philosophy, but I have no theory of what to put into practice. Let me be real clear. Is anybody saying we don't need tools? Do we use filters? Raise your hand if you use filters. Raise your hand if you use screen time or limits or anything like that. But are those the only tools available? No. We've all found tools that have helped us to shepherd our kids and teach and train them. So what, Anna, would be some tools that you have used in teaching and training your kids that you've seen bear fruit?
Well, I would say, for one thing, my kids are slightly older. So my oldest is 25, and this has evolved so much, so fast, that some of what I was starting to deal with when he was 13, 14, actually we didn't even consider getting an iPhone, because kids weren't getting iPhones in middle school. It just wasn't even a thing. So I feel that things have gotten a lot more intense. And so, I just want to put that out there, that things are evolving rapidly. I also want to encourage you that God is not remotely surprised by that. And he knew that was going to happen. And it actually was thinking about this today. Cars were a really radical technology, new development that put teenagers in a lot of potentially very dangerous situations. And we have learned to teach our kids about cars, and they have these really expensive, very dangerous things that they get the keys to. And God has brought us through, and we shepherd that we know now better how to deal with that. And that is going to be true about this device, these new devices as well. So I just say that to encourage you that God is not less God because phones are kind of scary. They can be scary. The other thing I would say, though, that really was wonderful in my kids' lives was that you've heard of the expulsive power of a greater affection. Thomas Chalmers was a preacher who talked about how our love for Jesus means that he begins to outshine. The things of earth grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace, right? So that actually is true in our kids' love for Jesus, but even if they're not yet believers, God put desires and loves in their heart that can draw them away from the danger of a cell phone. I'll use an example. I had 2 kids who played a lot of sports, and I had one who did a ton of debate, and they spent, there are no cell phones in a dugout. There are no cell phones on the sidelines of a basketball court. And if you pull up your cell phone in a debate tournament, you're probably going to get disqualified for cheating. So all that to say, they had other things that they loved more than spending time on the phone. And that is not a call to push your children into being really busy doing other things. Okay, don't hear me say that, but draw out those God-given passions. Like Missie, I think you have a daughter that loves art. She doesn't need to be on the phone necessarily when she's painting or drawing. Whatever it is that God can use to pry their eyes off the phone, and a lot of times that's people too. Help them to love people more than screens.
Absolutely. What would you say is a tool that has been helpful? You kind of mentioned, you teased it a little bit, but talking about incentivizing, I think that's a brilliant tool. So talk about how incentivizing can be a tool as we teach and train.
Yeah, I think sometimes we feel like, I shouldn't. I remember when other kids would be like, well, when I get A's, I get $5. And I was always like, what is that? Because my family was German and we didn't do any of that. But my oldest loves Pokemon. Any Pokemon people? Okay, you're my people. And so he loves screens, but he also loved Pokemon. And so God bless him, my husband learned to play Pokemon and took I think it was 10 maybe when we started going to a game store because there was a free league on Sunday afternoons, and they could play Pokemon. Now, you can play Pokemon online, but because we kept incentivizing, and we would, you're checking out at Target, and there's those little packs of Pokemon cards. I know way too much about Pokemon. And you can we would buy him a little Pokemon pack. And part of it all the way was trying to help him buy into this thing that he could do in person. And I never would have done that 10 years ago, but if you think about incarnational ministry, maybe you become a Pokemon mom. Because it helps your kids spend time with people.
Even if you hate Pokemon.
I can't.
Still.
I'm terrible. And part of it is, I think, as well, that you are free to experiment. Your God's grace is so wide. His mercy is so wide. You are going to screw up so many times. And that is okay. He's not out of control. You're not going to step outside. So you have this freedom that you forget that you have.
Yeah, and you're talking about like tools being specific to the person that God has made your child to be. So it's not like, I think when we think of tools and technology only as, do you have this, or this device, or this, or this name of company? Like, I think it limits the infinite possibilities of ways that we can aim and help our children if we just are creative about seeing needs and meeting needs for them, which ultimately I think so many kids, if they are on their phone, the ultimate bottom need is connection, right? They want to feel loved, they want to feel known, they want to feel, whatever it is that they are going to that device for. We as parents have to be like sleuths and try to figure out what that need is. Maybe for your child, it isn't relational connection, it's something else. But like, what can reproduce that in a way that is beneficial in the kingdom of God, and is going to bear fruit? I just think we don't like the hard work of like, it's so time consuming and difficult. It's hard. Missie, what would you say is a tool?
My youngest in particular, she's artistic, but she's 17, she's not just barely 17, so she would spend every minute with humpback disease, like just literally, I just stare down at my phone. But because she is an artist, I used to be a cake decorator, so I had a cake studio in our basement, so I removed a bunch of our stuff and start building in for her just the opportunity to have a little art studio, and I mean very cheap, but really, it just gave her a space to create in ways that are good for her. And so even in seasons that we've gone through some things in our family, she's been able to go to her studio and create. And so now the run is not to just the next YouTube video or the next TikTok, but to really she gets consumed with the things that she can make, and she's talented. And so it was really finding out what her thing was and then investing in it, and she loves it. Now, I also have her older sister has intellectual disabilities. So usually, and she's 20, but she's more like 13 in the head. And usually adults with disabilities, they will be obsessive over, movies or things like that. So she can literally sit on the couch and watch a movie from sun up to sundown. Like, she could just dive in. And so for her, while she's not going to necessarily be an artist, she loves crossword puzzles. So I have gone to the dollar store and bought like 50, every possible crossword puzzle. And if it's about movies or pop culture, it keeps her engaged to do something outside. And that seems so simple, but it took me forever to figure that out. Okay, so I'm saying that because rather than just being mad that they're on the phones, or on any device, I had to be creative to think of what are ways that I can swap that out so that I'm excited to do this. This is something I want to be invested in. And some of the things, just like you've said, I've had to watch movies. Lord knows I don't want to watch this. I have listened to series that I'm just like, dear Lord, I don't know. This isn't the first movie exactly like the second movie. I've seen them all now, okay? But the investment with them, when I say, if we're going to watch this movie, we're not going to be on our phones because I really want to get in that has even been worth it.
Well, and another thing that we kind of didn't touch on earlier, but I think that it's also helpful to think of the reason that we're training and teaching is because we want them to learn a skill set that's repeatable when they're on their own. Yes. So, like, obviously, if we are giving them this very rigid, specific list of, like, off phone by this time and don't do this more than this and make sure you're here and using this, whatever, like, once they're free, they're free. Like, they leave your house and they have their own phone and can do whatever they want. Like, I don't want my children to then be learning limits for the first time and to blow past them and then be trying to figure out as an adult outside of my home how to roll that back carefully. Right. So, like, as much as I think that we can give them freedom when they've earned it and when it is safe and appropriate, I think it becomes a good tool for exercising that responsibility in the same way that, like, making them purchase the phone. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that exercising freedom of, like, oh, you have a curiosity for art or cake baking. Pursue that. Mm-hmm. Press into that. Like, use technology for redemptive purposes where you're actually learning and growing and doing something that you love and using it for good. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not just a, like, waste of time. It can actually be super redemptive.
True.
So I would love to pivot a little bit and talk in these last few moments about the place of hope in technology. Because I think that in our conversations about technology, we're often very led by fear and, like, how can we guard and protect so that we don't experience this, or this? And I think that for me as a younger mom, I think I've benefited most from hearing from people who are in the next season above me say, it's all going to be okay. And I don't mean in a passive way that's like, yeah, you'll figure it out. I don't mean that. I mean, we as people who are followers of Jesus, we are led by hope, right? We are followers of Jesus because we have the hope of the gospel. And so if we remove the element of hope from a subject like teens and technology, we can be led by fear when we don't really actually need to be led by fear. So there's something behind that that keeps us from experiencing and resting and walking in the hope of Jesus in the middle of these things. So I would love knowing your stories, Anna. I would love for you to share a little bit about the hope that you found in your own parenting in the other side of technology.
Well, as we talked about before, my kids were kind of coming up as phones were becoming a thing. And so now they're in their 20s, and they all have a pretty healthy relationship with technology. And I want to say, with all seriousness, that was God's grace, because I think a couple of things. I'm a single mom, and I think God just said, you know what, that's just not going to be a huge battle for her. There were other battles. There were all the battles. But I just really think in his grace, that was not as much of they didn't struggle. My kids didn't struggle a whole lot with the phone. So that may be the case for you. If your kids are young and you're looking ahead, this may not be something that you have a huge struggle about. The second thing I would say, their healthy relationship with technology has absolutely nothing to do with me. I did not do all the right things. I did contracts, sorta, kinda, didn't always enforce them very well. I mean, I was a little bit all over the place. I did pray a lot because I was very desperate. But one of the amazing things is my kids now are in California and Washington, D.C., and Charlotte, North Carolina. And the phone is an amazing tool for us because we have a family group chat and we send pictures and memes. We text, hey, mom's on a panel at 3:30. Y'all pray. And they heart it, they like it, whatever. They're boys. I don't get a lot of words. You don't want to have high expectations for boys and communication on phones, so I'll just put that out there. But they have their own group chat that doesn't include me, and I can't even tell you how much I love that they have their own, and that relationship is facilitated by a cell phone. They are on fantasy football teams with their family all over the country, cousins and aunts and uncles that they don't even, and they're getting to know them, so when we do get together, they have a history of fighting over Tom Brady. So all that to say, it's been an amazing tool for a family that is scattered coast to coast, and I'm really grateful for it, and it's been a redemptive thing for us.
Thank you very much. Chris, what could you share about what's some hope that you've seen in these struggles?
Yeah, in a similar vein, so I have my youngest is 11, and he's on the spectrum, pretty low functioning. He's verbal, but he has a really hard time making friends. He has a hard time interpreting social interactions at all. Has lots of trauma in his background. He's adopted. So in the middle of COVID, and I always kept my phone away from him because screens were already a problem. I thought he couldn't even touch it. He wasn't allowed to pick it up. I was controlling that stuff. And in the middle of COVID, a mom of one of his friends called me and said, Mateo is this little boy's name, said, hey, Mateo's taking a friendship class, and one of his assignments is he has to have regular phone conversations with a friend. Do you think Ezra would be willing to do that? And I thought, oh, girl, he will talk to him all day long. But I thought it's going to be terrible because phone talking is a skill. And so, of course, I was very scared about him even touching the phone and then wanting to ask for more. But instead, what I heard was, now this kid can't hold like this, so it was like this, and it was on speaker and very loud and all around the rooms. He would just wander around. But what we heard was these two little boys forming a friendship over speakerphone every week. And that is how they became friends. And now they do play dates. And they go to each other's houses, they go to the pool together. So it was this, from fear, it was this development of this friendship. And I thought, look at what God can do. He can do whatever he wants with whatever he wants.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tee up your story because I think it's really helpful. But I think sometimes it's hard in groups like this because we're all at different places in parenting. It's hard to be at a panel where you think, well, but what about my kid if they've already fallen into stuff?
Yes.
And I think that's incredibly important to address because I think that God's grace is not too far away, right? It's near. That's why we have the gospel grace. And so I think if we think of the only successful way to parent our children with technology is to never mess up, we do them an injustice because we mess up every day in all kinds of capacities. So we're not teaching them, don't ever do this and you'll be safe and good. We're teaching them, when you mess up, this is what it should look like. And this is how you can find help and grace. And so I think one of the most hopeful things that I have reaped in my parenting years was absolutely by the grace of God when one of our children was struggling with something that I had been afraid of, and we did not catch it. Not because we didn't have tools, not because we didn't have lots of systems in place to guard, but just because the enemy is sneaky.
Yes.
And our children are smart. And wicked is wicked. And it seeks out our children. But because the mercy of the Lord is stronger, it goes farther and retrieves them. And to have one of our children hear their pastor dad preaching a sermon that had nothing to do with the internet, and of his own accord come to his dad after a sermon on a Sunday morning and say, I've got something I need to talk to you about. And to confess something that we didn't see and we hadn't caught made me trust God so much more because it was like, this is not something that we did. The Lord sees what we do not see, and he loves my child more than I love my child. And he will bring sin to light, and he will call them to repentance. And so the Lord produced the godly repentance that we longed for our children to have. And it was so much sweeter when it wasn't just because it was like a gotcha moment where there was a filter that I had paid $9.99 for. And so I think that one of the things that, Missie, I really appreciated about the story that you shared with me before was how does one handle that when it isn't something like we can have these moments where it's like, great, that kid came and told me. I got other kids, I don't know if they're going to do that. So what do we do when we find something?
Yeah, my baby girl, we could sense that there was something going on with her, but we couldn't quite tell, and that we didn't know what it was. But her demeanor was changing. She was a little more withdrawn. She's already an introvert, so it's already like, hi. But when I basically was like, I need to see your phone, and they are very smart, so nothing was obvious. She was involved in a very benign kids game, and there were people chatting to her, and those chats started to get a little wild, and she didn't know what to do with it, so she got scared, and so it just led to her down this, I'm depressed, I'm scared, kind of thing. And okay, but we've had all these conversations about the phone, and I've threatened you, and your life is on the line, and it didn't work, But what we found is that, she's our fourth. We've watched our children mess up a million times, and the reality is that's what they're going to do, because that's what we do. We mess up, and then our gracious Savior says, I know. Yeah. I saw it coming, babe. And so for our youngest, one of the things we did wind up having to do was actually get her some counseling, because her fear led her to other behaviors, and it kind of spiraled. And so we wound up getting her counseling, but we made it clear that this counseling is not punitive. Like, you're not in trouble. We actually are so concerned with you that we want to make sure that no damage is being done long term. We need you to have more tools. And those more tools are not necessarily, like you said, the thing I pay for. We need you to have tools that you can carry through life. And so while, yes, I wasn't trying to be a killjoy, but I never have any problem killing all the joy if we have to. We took her phone for a while. She was forced to spend a lot more time with us. But we also spent a lot of time talking through some of the things that we had learned about in counseling. And she is now on the other side. And I'm sure she's going to mess up again because that's just the nature of sin. And she is not a believer. And so I've learned not to treat her like one. And we've even had conversations where I have seen text messages of hers. And she was using language that I don't approve of. And I said, sweetheart, I know you're not a believer, but you're my child. You're going to watch your mouth, you know. And she has respected that. She said to me, Mommy, I really respect that you didn't yell at me, that you saw me. And, you have a standard, and I intend to live by it. And so it's really been really a good experience for her to fall apart, and we have to rebuild her life back together. And just one last encouragement. Guys, most of you don't have moms who've had to raise their kids with phones. We're learning this, and it's okay. Give yourself grace.